Welcome to WCAT. I'm Kiki Latimer, and I'm your host for the Catholic Bookworm. And I'm very happy to have with me today Father Bill Waters. Welcome, Father Bill.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be with you.
Father Bill has a new book out. It's a compilation of articles, 9 or 10 articles that he's written over the past 44 years. And the book now is titled Smelling Like the Sheep as We Minister to God's People. Great name, love it. A compilation of articles on everything from family spirituality to premarital sex to the influence of Pope Francis. So great collection. We're going to discuss them this afternoon, I guess it is now. And so, Father, you want to start us off with a prayer, please?
Sure. Thanks, Kiki. Loving God, we thank you for all your blessings and graces, especially the gift of your Son, Jesus, and the gift that Jesus has invited all of us into his ministry and to work with his flock, with his people. We thank you for that. We thank you for the opportunity today to be able to talk about many issues of the church and of feeding Jesus's flock. Help me to be able to say the things you want me to say, hear the things you want to be heard. May we be aware of your presence today as we basically talk about you and your church and smelling like the sheep.
Amen. Sounds good. I love sheep. They're cute. I like the lambs. It's all good. So, tell us a little bit about yourself for starters.
Sure. Kiki, I'm originally from Philadelphia. I'm the youngest of 6 children. I went to a small college up in New Hampshire, St. Anselm College. And then I joined the Augustinians. I got to know them in high school. I went to college as a regular college student and then joined the Augustinians. I was ordained in 1971. You're supposed to say, well, you don't look that old, but you didn't say that. So I'm ordained 53 years. Most of my life has been in parish work, not all of it, but I've been a pastor of 5 different parishes along the East Coast. I spent 30 years up north of Boston in what's called the Merrimack Valley area, Lawrence, Andover, Methuen, Massachusetts. In addition to parish work, I was our Augustinian vocation director for a while, formation director of our men in theology, and I spent 6 years at Merrimack College doing campus ministry. Loved working with the college kids.
Yes, you've worked with a lot of young people.
Yeah, yes.
Keeps you young.
and then the last 10 years, I was pastor at St. Augustine Parish in Philadelphia. That's the first foundation of the Augustinians in North America and the United States. And I was there from 2014 to 2014 to 2024. And I just left there in this past July. And I tell people I'm too young to retire. I'm 81. But I am living with our Augustinians at Villanova University and retired from administration. And right now helping out retreat houses for confessions, different parishes for masses. This weekend right now, I'm going to be working a Rectovi weekend, which is a retreat for couples with difficult marriages. So I just got an email today about helping out daily masses during Lent, where some parishes going to have 2 masses and there's only 1 priest. And so I'm helping out, and I'm doing prison ministry now too. I've been saying mass 2 Saturday nights a month at a prison called Phoenix Prison, which is in Collegeville, Pennsylvania.
Plenty busy.
So I'm involved. I stay involved, but not in administration.
Good. I bet you don't miss that much.
No, I don't. I really don't. It's really fun to go into a parish and say mass and not to have to worry if the doors are unlocked, if the lights are on, if there are altar servers or the candles are lit. Just come in, say mass, and leave, and don't worry about having to lock up or anything else. So it's great.
Well, since we're on that topic, I mean, one of your chapters is about that very thing.
It is.
So maybe we'll just jump, and my husband and I, we've talked, as converts, we've talked about this often, that so often our pastors just get so bogged down, with everything, like you said, from the clogged toilet to the roof to the, the
Absolutely true.
bugs in the basement.
It's absolutely true. And that article, which you're referring to, I wrote, was in 2018, so that's about 7 years now. What the title of the article is "What the Bishop Didn't Say at Ordination." Right. He talked a lot about preaching and sacraments and working with the poor. Bishop Peter Van Diepen, I'm an Augustinian. He was an Augustinian who ordained us. But most of my life as a pastor is spent in the administration things.
Yeah.
And I think the height of that, when I wrote that article, was in the parish. We were involved in a very important need, our capital campaign. The goal was 750,000. We raised about $1 million. But, putting that together really highlighted a lot of this. You're dealing with the whole structure,
Well, here in the Diocese of Providence, I'm in Rhode Island. We've had a wonderful Bishop Henning, and he got scooped up, and now he's Archbishop of Boston, Richard Henning.
Right, that just happened. Right,
we're having trouble finding a bishop, and I've been told that one of the reasons the priests don't want to become bishops is because they know it's going to be 90% administrative work, 10% pastoral.
Right.
So something has to change.
And that's true in the parish, at a pastoral level.
Yeah.
If, as I say in that article, I'm standing in the back of the church and a young girl, 10 years old, comes up and says, "Father, the toilet's clogged." I wanted to say, "How was the homily?"
Hopefully better than the toilet, right?
Right. But, and that's, at all, the roof needs to be taken care of. But as I'd left the parish, I just left, we were doing $250,000 worth of work on the steeple. So that money has to be raised. So yeah, it's some of it goes with the turf. I think any job, there's administration. But I do think that as a church, we could probably do better.
If you think about it, in a family, you've got mom and dad sharing pastoral responsibilities and administrative responsibilities.
Yes, right.
But in the church family, you've just got the pastor sort of bogged down with everything.
Yeah. Well, and there's help. I mean, there's all the parishes where I was a pastor, which were 5. We had very fine parish finance commissions, people who were very qualified. Had people who were on staff, who are facilities director, but it all comes back down to the pastor at the end with all that.
The buck stops with you.
Right. And the parish finance commission, they're all volunteers, and, they're willing to give a couple hours a month, but, which is tremendous input. I don't want to minimize that. Tremendous input of information and giving ideas and direction, but it comes down to the pastor. And,
it does limits your pastoral time and abilities.
And as I say in that article, can we look at canon law and even change canon law to some degree of someone who is non-ordained can be the administrator directly responsible to the bishop. Now that's hairy. It's not that easy. I know it has its own negative ramifications. I know that, but can we move in that direction and look at that? Some places, have priestless parishes. Some places do that. And some places have had to do it because of necessity.
Yep.
Here on the East Coast, we haven't had to do it yet because of necessity, but more and more it's going to be coming that way.
Mm.
So yes, that's one of the articles, what the bishop didn't say at ordination, and how do we deal with that?
Well, going back to your first article, which you wrote 44 years ago, but is more pertinent today than ever, is spiritual guidance in the family setting, and
Right.
that's where spiritual guidance really begins, is with the family.
That's right.
And that while some of us can make it out alive, without that and find our way to the church, it's for most people, it's really just vital that.
Precisely. This is where any relationships begin in a family. Relationships with, obviously, parents and people in authority, relationships with peers or siblings, and our relationship with God begins in the family.
Mm.
And how does that get developed or not get developed? And
Right.
the primary responsibility, obviously, are the parents. And that goes back to baptism. What name do you give your child? What are you asking of God's church? Are you going to train your child in the practice of the faith? Well, I've been ordained 53 years. I never heard anybody say no. I can't say that's always happened.
Right.
And more today, there is competition in our society and the values of society to do that. More and more.
I mean, so many unchurched parents now that you can see things crumbling.
Right. And more the values in our society are becoming godless. I used an example of that, and it comes out in different articles, I think, especially the one on evangelization. But examples of that is when people sneeze today. People respond, "Bless you," instead of "God bless you." Let's keep God out of it, type of thing. So the family is that first article, and that came out of a program I was involved in. It was a program to help train spiritual directors down in Washington, D.C. And everybody had to do a paper for the program, and I did a paper on family. And within that article, I talk about a lot of different families and what they try to do.
Yeah.
And some of them are very, very unique, what they try to do around Christmas time or even on a very daily basis. So there's some really, in that article, some very practical things from families of what they were trying to do with their children.
And one of the things that Pope Francis has brought out pretty recently is the importance, especially nowadays, of grandparents.
He talks about that all the time. And he talks about that from his own experience of grandparents. He attributes his grandparents, I believe, to a lot of his faith development. Right. I talk about that with grandparents a lot. When I was on the college campus at Merrimack, a lot of the college students would say that most of their affiliation with church and what have you was from grandparents and not so much the parents.
Right. And especially with two parents working all the time now, or almost all the time, it's even more important that you're available for grandchildren. I've got 14 grandchildren, and the older ones are driving now, and they stop by to chat. And
sure, which is great.
Yeah, it's really good.
Which is great. But yeah, obviously it's in the family setting where people first come to know God and the relationship, how to talk to God, how to relate. And that depends on the degree that the family isn't willing to be involved. Right.
And just that extended family support, including godparents you mentioned in that article, the importance of being involved.
Right. Again, I talk about godparents a lot. It's not just an honorary degree. A lot of times, and when I was in the parish for baptism instruction, or I would meet with couples, and a lot of time on Zoom. One time I would meet with the couples, the parents on Zoom, And then I would meet with the parents and godparents on Zoom and talk about the role of godparents. And very honestly, and I would say to them, I bet you when you were called and you asked to be a godparent, you said, "Oh, I'm honored." And they all said, "Yeah, that is exactly what I said. I'm honored." And, they take it like an honorary degree.
They're
And
gone.
if I push you a little bit, well, what's your role? A lot of times it'll be, well, if something happens to the parents, we need to be around. Well, suppose if nothing happens to the parents, I will say. Nothing happens to them. Do you have any role? Well, yeah, yes, yeah. And, the role is to be actively involved in the spiritual development of the child. And and also to give support to the parents. Because a lot of times the parents might not have a lot of support.
I think also as the culture has changed, I want to mention the importance of confirmation sponsors.
Sure.
Because now, a child doesn't pick their godparents, the parents do. So they may or may not have a relationship. But when it comes to confirmation sponsors, the young person has picked you. They've hopefully picked you because they like you or they think
they'll know you'll give a Christmas present.
Right. So I think confirmation sponsors
Absolutely.
have a really big role because you can stay connected with that young person. Usually it's right around, puberty is hit and all the issues are coming up. And so confirmation sponsors have a great possibility of influencing.
And a lot of that that's certainly very, very true, Kiki. But a lot of that too is why the person being confirmed chooses the person. Do they really choose them because they're a good model? That would be a question. The whole question of confirmation and the age of confirmation. I don't think that comes out in any of the articles. But that's another whole ball game. What's the proper age of confirmation? Would we let a 13-year-old kid or 14, 15 make a commitment for life in marriage and priesthood, religious life? So it's the whole thing of what's the theology of confirmation, and is it a sacrament of initiation? If it is, it should be before communion, because communion is the full participation in the church. So do I get initiated after I have full participation? Or is it really emphasizing the maturity of I'm accepting this and owning this for myself? And would we let a 13, 14-year-old kid, do that with anything else? So that's another whole question.
I always look at it as an extra super dose of grace just before you have to make the biggest decisions of your life.
It is.
But I do like it for that reason, hopefully.
But sponsors are very, very important. I talk about godparents a lot. One of the things I talk about, especially with godparents of baptism, is celebrating the anniversary of the baptism. We all know our date of birth. We all know, a lot of people know the date of when they first went out with their husband or their wife, or they know the date of their engagement, but they know the date of the baptism.
Right.
And keeping that alive. And every year on the anniversary of the baptism, having a little cake. We just had one for the birthday. There's another one. And bringing out the candle. Put the candle on the cake, and maybe have the godparents come. I always used to say, invite me to dinner, and maybe pictures of the baptism for 10 minutes, not for an hour, 10 minutes. And say, today's the anniversary of your baptism. Here are some pictures of it. It's a great thing that happened in your life. Well, if you do that on a regular basis, child growing up says my baptism is important. And the godparents to be part of that as well.
Yeah. So those little celebrations are important and they speak to a child.
Absolutely. Sure. Oh, to all of us. Right.
We do Compline with the kids. That's been a fun family tradition. And And each, as the kids have gotten older, they've each, once they could read, they got to be the officiant for Compline, and they love that.
Sure. Taking on a
Your
different role.
second piece is on marriage preparation and that it comes too late. And very interesting. We were talking, my husband and I were talking this morning, and you mentioned it in the article, which I had never really thought about, that when a couple gets engaged, they immediately, put down deposits. The ring is expensive. They put down a deposit for the reception and the band, and all of that stuff gets booked. And then they come for counseling, so they have a huge financial investment.
Precisely. By the time they come to talk to the priest or the deacon, all those other arrangements have been made. And so some things surface, and they do at times. Well, it's kind of embarrassing to break the engagement because it was very public. It's kind of costly to break the engagement because we paid a lot of money for this ring, and deposits for the videographer and all these people. So we know a big issue comes up. Well, we'll deal with that later, or he'll change or she'll change. And my whole thing is, let's try to surface these issues to help make the decision to get engaged rather than after being engaged. And that takes a mammoth change of thinking, but it doesn't happen a lot. But I'd much rather talk to couples, help them make the decision to get engaged, and go through the whole process of the preliminary marriage inventory and discussions, and then make this. Yeah, we are on the right page, and this whole process is had me more enthused to want to do this. Or hey, there's some issues here we need to figure out before this becomes official.
So one of the things you talk about is what you call remote prep, starting really in childhood, again, back to the family.
Sure.
Back to the family.
Precisely. Well, there's where people get a model of married life, hopefully. That couples, that as children grow up, they see that their parents, that this is their first vocation. That they see that their parents take that seriously. And even kids growing up see their parents go out one night a week, and they might not go to soccer practice this week. They went, 3 nights already, but the kids can see that kids can see that their parents want to spend quality time with themselves. That this is their first vocation. That's a lot of the remote preparation for marriage is the good modeling.
Right.
Our whole theology is I give my whole self to you, totally and completely. This is what is modeled, and this is what the kids pick up.
It's a tough world right now because we know a lot of kids are living, parents have divorced, they're living with mom and the second husband, sometimes they're living with mom and the third husband.
That's right.
So it's tough on kids. One of the things you mentioned was a 1980 sort of church survey that said, 1 in 2 marriages in general fails, but then those who attend church, 1 in 50 fails. And those who attend church and read scripture, which gives an indication that there's a little bit deeper involvement in church life, it's up to 1 in 1,000.
1,106, I think the figure it was.
Yeah.
Right.
So really start to see the importance of mass, of church attendance. My husband and I go to daily mass, and just the fact that we have to give the kiss of peace at 8 o'clock in the morning keeps us from killing each other.
Right. But again, what coming to church keeps me focused. I always say, I don't think it comes out in any of these articles. I always say, Jesus did not give us the church to make life difficult. You got to go to the Christmas fair, you got to play bingo, you got to put money in a collection. He didn't give us the church to make life difficult. He gave us the church because he knew life would be difficult. And he wanted us to have signs of his presence and his strength with us throughout life. And by without being fanatical, without being extreme, but being part of the church on a regular basis helps me to be aware of God's presence, helps me to hear God's word, helps me maybe to integrate it, but helps me to be aware of God's presence and be strengthened by the Eucharist and all those great things of why he gave us the church. And that helps us to deal with the messiness of life.
Mm. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is you'll see a family that comes to church, mom, dad, and the kids, and they come to church and they come to church. And as far as we know, like everything is great with that family. And then you don't see them at church for a few weeks. And then a month later, you find out dad has left or mom has left. Somebody, usually dad has left. The parents are separated and they're getting a divorce. And no one in the church had any idea, because when you come to church, you have to put on your Sunday clothes and your best face. And so I've always wondered, like, how do we get past that in a parish? Because, you don't bring your dirty laundry to church, So when people struggle, no one knows to reach out and help that family.
I think an important thing with that, Kiki, is parishes making things available. At the last parish where I just was, St. Augustine's in Philadelphia, we had socials after each of the masses. And there were different tones. 9:00 mass was coffee and donuts. At 11:00 mass was a Filipino community. They'd always have the meal. 7:00 mass in the evening was a lot of young people. And we'd have beer and wine and pretzels or pizza or something like that. Ice cream. So different tones, but opportunities for people to come together and have camaraderie, and not just going to church, but afterwards mingling and getting to know each other. So that, to me, that back to your question, if we have some opportunities for people to come to get to know each other, build relationships, we call it building community. Then you get to know different people and maybe reach out to different ones at different times of difficulties.
So it's really the forming of relationships.
Relationships, community. I go to church each week. I sit in the same pew, and I leave and go in the parking lot and get out at the same time. I'm not interacting at all with anybody. Obviously that's better than nothing. I'm hearing the word, hopefully being nourished by the Eucharist. But as far as the parish community, I'm not interacting with anybody. And so, building community is so important.
One of your chapters, you do talk about how we can help couples avoid divorce, which,
right. One of the things I ask couples to do who are planning to get married is to write a game plan. I'll say, the Eagles had a game plan this past weekend for the Super Bowl. And they really did have a game plan. It was different from a lot of the other games, I think. But they can relate to, different sports have a game plan for this team and that team and be different. Can they have a game plan? Then how are we going to make this work? It doesn't just happen. So I asked them to do a game plan. And they'll come up with things like, on their own, go out socials once a week or once a month, or take vacations, or never go to bed mad. And sometimes they'll bring in religion, but if they don't, I bring that in and say, well, how does this fit into your game plan about getting to church and what have you? So I think that game plan, how to avoid divorce, things like living out the vocation of marriage, being part of the faith community, going to mass, going to confession, praying with each other. To what degree do I want to get involved? I mean, some couples will read the scriptures for next Sunday before they go. And when they go to mass, those scriptures are not unfamiliar to them. They're relatable. Can we pray together? The family that prays together stays together. And a lot of times I'll say, do we wonder why so many families don't stay together? How many pray together? Because what they're doing is sharing some of their most intimate thoughts and feelings. So praying together, looking at scripture, certainly going to mass, different families have a lot of different creative ideas of what they can do. But yeah, help avoid divorce, a game
You
plan.
mentioned Retrovi. Maybe you'd talk a little bit about Retrovi.
Retrovi is a lot of people have heard of Marriage Encounter.
Right.
Basically, Marriage Encounter came about from Father Gallagher, who was in Long Island, for marriages with good relationships, couples with good marriages, to strengthen their relationships. And Retrovi is a weekend for couples who have difficulties in their marriages, whatever that may be. But yet they're willing to try to look at them and work it out. It's facilitated by couples who have been there. It's facilitated by couples who have been there, who have had difficulties. And they share with the couples who were there for the weekend how they handle them. And a lot of it is dialogue, communication,
Forgiveness.
well, forgiveness, but even, yes, certainly forgiveness, but even before that, of how to dialogue and sharing of feelings, and not just being judgmental, but how to listen, and how to make a distinction between feelings and thoughts. I don't reject feelings are neither right nor wrong. This is a very important concept of Retrovi Marriage Encounter. Feelings are neither right nor wrong. Don't tell me how to feel. If I want to share a thought with you, we can discuss it. Feelings are, please accept my feelings. Understand where I'm coming from. That's a lot of the dynamic of Retrovi, is learning how to communicate, accepting feelings, and how to share feelings and share thoughts and things like that.
You mentioned that this is usually run by couples that have, been there and done that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This weekend, this afternoon, I'm starting a weekend. I'm on the team. There'll be 3 couples. And they run it mostly. They prepare it. They do all the preparation, registration, and they actually run the weekend. The priest is there for some spiritual talks and obviously confessions and mass and what have you. But yeah, they run it.
Which kind of can bring us into chapter 5 here on evangelization. And that the idea that lay people have many opportunities to evangelize. You started that chapter off saying most people don't even like the word. And I'm one of those people because I think when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I was in a park with a couple of my sister and brother and a social worker who had taken us to the park. And I have this memory of these 2 people coming up to us and evangelizing from some Protestant group. And it was horrible. It wasn't a pleasant experience. And we kind of, once we got rid of them, we laughed about it. And so that's my, when I hear that word, that image always comes back, out on the street corner.
Right. A lot of people have a hard time with the word. They think of someone on the street corner, or they think of somebody going door to door, knocking on doors and selling Bibles and pushing themselves on you and all that.
Right.
But again, Pope Francis speaks a lot about evangelization, an awful lot. And it comes back to our baptism. At the baptism, the priest or the deacon, may you soon hear the word of the Lord. May you soon proclaim the message. And that's what we're all called to do, is to hear it and proclaim it. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. We don't have to be missionaries. We don't have to stand on the street corners. We don't have to necessarily go to not at all, go to other countries, but our own environment where we are. And I would tell people in the parish all the time, people that you're going to see and deal with this week, I'm not. You have opportunities of, quote, evangelizing or, talking to people on the spiritual level that I don't. And it can be just as simple as inviting somebody to mass or wearing a symbol, a Christian symbol. I'm in Philadelphia and everybody here is wearing Eagles outfits right now. Great. It's fun. The parade's happening right this minute. And everybody, will wear the Eagles hats, and that's showing their identity. Can we show this? And just wearing a cross. Well, we do that with Ash Wednesday. But just wearing a cross or whatever it might be, it's just a symbol. Or do I take the parish bulletin to somebody? And someone says, oh, I didn't know they had AA meetings there. I didn't know that they had craft there, or, or inviting somebody to the Christmas concert. Things like that. I tell the story. I think it's in one of the articles. We had a parishioner in another parish where I was when I was in Massachusetts, and she was at work. She worked in Boston, and she invited someone, or someone else there, invited her for a drink. Go out for a drink after work. She said, "I can't." She said, "We're having a parish mission, and I'm going to go to that. But if you would like to come to the parish mission with me, we could go out after that and have a drink." Well, that person did, and she ended up in our RCIA program.
I love it.
Yeah. So I tell the story too of the young guy who I baptized years ago. He's in his 30s now, but when he was in college, he was at St. Michael's in Vermont. He was having breakfast at lunch at Sunday or dinner, and they said, "Ben, where are you going?" He said, he got up from the table. He said, "I'm going to Mass." He didn't say, "You want to go with me?" He said, "I'm going to Mass." He got to church, looked around. Some of the kids that he just was having dinner with said people behind him. It's things like that I'm not ashamed. I don't have to bounce it through somebody's throat, but I can, invite someone to Mass, say God bless you, not bless you, celebrate the anniversary of baptisms, confirmation, certainly weddings. Those kinds of things are just very ordinary things. Or, some things that may be more serious. If somebody said they had a bad experience with the church or with a priest, to be able to direct them to where they may be able to get some help to deal with the issue. The person who's saying that to them may not be saying it to me. But say it to a lay person, and they could direct somebody. So that's evangelization, and some of the very ordinary things of life.
Yeah, just our ordinary life, but
not to be afraid of it. Not too long ago, this ring, you can see it. Here you go. You see it now.
Yeah.
I was on an airplane a couple of weeks ago, and someone said to me, "What's that ring?" And I said, "Oh, that's a sign of the Augustinian order." "Oh, well, who are they?" And it's just an opportunity to talk.
Yeah. And to share our stories. I often talk about how important our stories are. As C.S. Lewis said, we read to know we're not alone. We tell our stories to know we're not alone. And sometimes your story can make a huge difference in someone's life.
And Jesus was the best storyteller. The parables. Jesus would tell stories all the time to get a point across. But he did it on a teaching level there. But what you're meaning is sharing our story. And listening to other people's story. There's where they comes into not being judgmental. It's just but listening.
Just listen. Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah. There's lots of things that can be done in a very ordinary way, without being dramatic.
Right, which is an entirely different concept of evangelization than most of us have in our minds when we hear the word.
Right.
You got to come up with a new word.
I mentioned in the book, in the introduction, the parish where I was just pastor, we would begin our parish pastor council meetings with, "What did I do this past month?" And the list of those things. Bring the parish bulletin, someone celebrated baptism, say God bless you, invite somebody to a parish thing. So at the end of the meeting, we'd say, they would all say, "Here's what I'm going to do this month." And then at the beginning of the next meeting, they would share if they were able to do it or not and what it was like. And that was inspirational for each other to hear what other people were doing, and it was feasible.
And I think also, I share a lot the fact that I, almost always get to daily Mass because I really need that grace. And recently I've started going to weekly confession, which I found has also just been a great way to get extra grace and really sort of zero in on little things. I used to go, once or twice a year, like when I murdered somebody, and, but going once a week.
And when the prison chaplain showed up.
Right. But with now going over little things, I find I can fine tune sometimes just even my thoughts. Like, okay, I didn't do anything rotten. I say, I know the good and I do the good, but I don't always love the good. And so it's helped me fine tune, I hope, my thoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
But
And
beyond that, Kiki, just to be able to say to someone, I went to confession last week and boy, did it feel good.
yeah.
I say to people at the end of each confession, after the whole thing, and absolution, the whole bit, I'll say, you're as clean in God's eyes as the day you were baptized. Wow. You're as clean in God's eyes. And that's the beauty of the beautiful sacrament. And for someone to say, I went to confession, and what a wonderful feeling that was. Just to share that.
Yeah. Yeah. Who is it that talks about, trying to think, Kelly, last name is Kelly, but he talks about how we clean our car,
Sure.
in summer when we have a nice, beautiful car that we love, we get to the car wash, every week or so. But we don't do the same with ourselves.
Sure.
Matthew
Again,
Kelly.
Matthew Kelly. It's a great opportunity to take stock, great opportunity to experience the forgiveness of Jesus. And I always also say, sometimes people have this bad concept the priest is going to yell or scream. And if they've had bad experiences, they had. And I'm not saying that, and people have had bad experiences. You did what? How many times? I said, I'll apologize to them. I said, I'm sorry that happened. The whole purpose that Jesus gave us the sacrament of penance is to experience his peace and his forgiveness. That's the whole purpose. And the fact that the person is there, except for a lot of times, takes a lot of guts for some people. And it's just going to be, it's a great opportunity to communicate God's forgiveness. And if somebody experiences that, to be able to, without being obnoxious about it, be able to say, boy, did I have a great experience.
Right.
We
Also to acknowledge, it can be really difficult to go.
Sure.
And it can be painful and it can be all of those things.
Embarrassing, sure.
Yeah. It can be tough.
Especially if I haven't been there for a while, or I have had a big experience a long time ago, or I heard of bad experiences. Hopefully people can have good experiences.
Yeah. I think especially for women, especially with sexuality and sexual sins, you're confessing to a man. It can be difficult. It can be, something to get over, but it's worth it. You get that grace, you get that forgiveness, you can move on. It's really it's a beautiful gift.
Right.
And given by the church, by Jesus.
That's right. Given by Jesus. Exactly. And he gave it to us for a purpose.
Yep. Chapter 6, you talk about our beloved Pope Francis. I love him. As a convert, it's really been fun. My husband and I came into the church under JP2, which was a great delight. And one of the things that brought us in was the writings of Joseph Ratzinger. So when he became, Pope Benedict the 16th, we were happy. He was filling big shoes with the death of John Paul. But he did a beautiful job with it. And I sort of look at the foundation that the two of them created very strongly, that I always say now Pope Francis dances upon that foundation. And I love it. Yeah.
Right. I don't think there's any secret. Pope Francis is a controversial person. There are people, and there are Catholics who don't like him. And I, of course, find that sad. But a lot of times what they will say,
Very sad.
a lot of times what they'll say, and I've heard some hierarchy, a lot of times what they'll say is he confuses people. And that whole article that you're referring to here is, if Pope Francis confuses people, I said he's in good company, because Jesus confused people all the time. When he told the story about, the son who wasted everything, and he come home and you're welcome home, we're going to have a party for you, that had confused people. When he would touch the leper, and all of that, or the man with the withered hand on the Sabbath, people were confused all the time by him,
Right.
because it wasn't going along with the norms. So my whole point is that, and the people that when that article was written, it was 2019. So there was a lot of talk then about he was confusing people, and that's where that came from. That Jesus confused people all the time. So yeah, I think a lot of
I think there is always that desire for things to be, black and white.
Right, that's right.
To have that rigidity of
I was just going to say
black and white, and that's all there is to it. But human life isn't
Exactly.
black and white.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. And
Shades of gray,
that's what I was just about to say, and that's what's in the article. Is when people find things confusing, they're looking for some rigidity. It's not rigidity to have healed the man with the withered hand on the Sabbath. That's like, hey, this man's more important than the Sabbath. Keeping the law. It's what Jesus modeled. That doesn't say we don't have laws, you shouldn't keep the laws. I'm not saying that at all. But, sometimes I might have to go through the red light if I have to get to the hospital. Jesus wasn't rigid like that. And Pope Francis is certainly not rigid. And he talks about that. And Pope Francis talks a great deal about helping people to form their conscience. Helping to be able to do that. And that's a lot of what that article is about. Go ahead.
I say, when you look at families today, especially with, all the, second, third, fourth marriages, the children can so easily get lost.
Oh, sure.
That it's so important that the church reach out to these families that are in, different types of marriages, and, everything's not perfect. And, because if we don't, we're losing them, but we're also losing the children.
Sure.
And
again, there's where rigidity comes in about, with priests to some people. Don't you dare come near us until you take care of this and do that. We have great opportunities.
Right.
Maybe some young people who hardly ever go to church, they come to get married. That's a great opportunity. Opportunity to be able to talk to them about the beauty of the church and the Eucharist and what have you, rather than you come back to me after you gone to church for 2 months every Sunday, and then we'll talk. That, and Jesus. That's where I think the Pope. You used the expression just a while ago. Things aren't always black and white, and I think that's where the Pope sometimes confuses people, because it's not that rigidity.
But so often people, he uses the term, you've made a shipwreck of your life. And okay, but we can't say to those people, well, when you get your boat fixed, come to the church.
That's right.
Like, we have to say, bring you and your shipwreck and the whole mess, bring it all in. And
St. Augustine says, I don't know if this is in any of the articles, is that we're all in the inn. You know how they brought the Samaritan, Good Samaritan brought the person who was knocked off the horse to the inn. That St. Augustine says, we're all in the inn. We are all broken.
Right.
We're all broken, and we all need healing. All of us.
Right.
And a great opportunity for the church is to be able to reach out to people who are broken and need healing. We're all in the inn.
Right. Yeah. And I talk about that. I've taught homiletics, and I
Mm.
talk about, a lot of times homilies will say, us and them, rather than all of us are in the
Sure.
same boat. You
Precisely.
know, some of us just wear our sins better than other people do,
Sure.
but we're all in the boat,
That's right. That's right.
healing and forgiveness and, you know.
We're all part of the people of God, all different roles, but all part of the people of God.
Right.
But St. Paul talks about how, the body of Christ is, like the physical body. You have an elbow and you have a knee and you have a toe and you have an eyebrow. They're all different, but all different places, all different parts. That's the body of Christ.
That's
All
the
of us,
body.
all of us together.
Yeah. When you mentioned one of the things, when the last one says, looking for the Pope Francis effect, feel good. I love the comment, feel good about being Catholic again.
Right, right. Well, with that article, I did not write that article. That's an article from National Catholic Reporter, NCR.
Yeah.
I went to the parish, St. Augustine's, in 2014. The Pope's message of the joy of the gospel had just come out. So I asked the parish pastoral council, could we just put everything on hold for a little while? And every meeting for 4 or 5 months, read the joy of the gospel, take something out of each chapter, and then come up with some kind of a pastoral plan. And we did. The pastoral plan was creating a community of involvement and evangelization. And I think at that point, a lot of people were feeling good about being Catholic because of Pope Francis. And they would say that. He's making me feel good about being a Catholic. And a lot of that comes out of his early writings, like The Joy of the Gospel. Even people who are not Catholic were very much taken by him because he's a positive person. And he can be stern. He just wrote a very stern letter to the bishops of the United States. But he's faithful to the gospel. So I think Pope Francis did make people feel good to be Catholic again. But that article that you're referring to, what we did was look at the joy of the gospel, came up with that pastoral plan of creating a community of involvement, evangelization. And the National Catholic Reporter, somehow or another, I really don't remember now, I think it was 2017, they picked up that was happening. I don't know how they did. And they interviewed me, and they interviewed parishioners.
Nice.
Not just me, of how Pope Francis was having an effect on the parish today. That's where that whole, the effect of Pope Francis. So that article was written not by me, it was written by another person who was teaching, I think, at St. John's University in New York at the time.
It was interesting. Yeah.
So it was about what we were doing to integrate Pope Francis's teachings.
One of your articles, we just came out of Advent and Christmas. I just actually pulled down the very last of those sort of winter decorations. I decorate the church. And you mentioned about Christmas being, well, first of all, like you say, we're out of sync with the culture when it comes to Christmas, because the Christmas tree gets thrown out the day after, and we're just starting the Christmas season.
Precisely. That article came about the editor, who's now Bishop Bonner, Bonnar. He was not bishop then, but he asked me to write that article about how priests live the Christmas season. And the whole gist of that article is how we live the Christmas season depends how we live the Advent season. If we live the Advent season, like our society is telling us to do, like it's all Christmas time, well, come Christmas night, thank God it's all over and Christmas is over.
We're exhausted by then.
Exactly. But Christmas is only beginning then. And Christmas season goes to the baptism of Jesus. Well, most people will take down their Christmas tree, if not the day after Christmas, certainly the day after Thanksgiving, or the day after New Year's. And the season's over. Where Christmas, Advent is not Christmas. I very much tried not to have Christmas parties and things like that during Advent.
It's tough.
It's a tough uphill battle.
Yeah.
We would have concerts, and we called them pre-Christmas concerts or Advent, not Christmas concerts.
Yeah.
It's just a way of teachable moment of trying to express to people what the seasons are about.
Right.
But yeah, there's a real value to Advent. It's a beautiful season. There's a real value of waiting. You know, Martha and Mary waited for Jesus when Lazarus was sick. You know, the whole parable of the weeds is waiting and waiting for them. There's a whole thing. We're not very good about waiting in our culture and our society. Everything's instantaneous and right now. But that whole season of Advent is about waiting, and that's okay. All right, now that we've celebrated, now let's celebrate the birth.
Right.
That's the whole point of that article.
Well, speaking of waiting, one of your, I think, toughest articles is Why Wait Till Marriage?
Right.
Speaking of waiting.
Right.
It's a tough nowadays. It's a tough culture. Although, you know, young people, the younger young people today are starting to wait. It's very interesting. I think we're seeing different statistics coming out in the last 10 years that young people are looking at the shipwrecks around them and saying, you know, I don't want to jump into that boat too quickly.
It's interesting that you use that analogy. That's an analogy I use with couples getting married. I'll come back to that in a second if you want, about getting into a boat and staying in the boat. But we'll come back to that. But the whole thing of the sexuality is we live in a society where I think a lot of 8th grade kids, or certainly seniors in high school, think if I'm not in bed with somebody, something's wrong with me. And that culture, that mentality comes from a lot of stuff we see in the movies and TV and how people are living. Where sexuality, a lot of people think the church thinks sexuality is dirty and ugly and bad. And it's not. It's don't do this and don't do that, or, you know, it's not negative. It's beautiful. Two people say to each other, this is what a lot of the gist of that article is. Two people say to each other, I love you so much, I'm going to give my whole self to you. Totally and completely. That's my lifestyle. So you give now, and a sign of my giving my whole self to you is the very act of physical intercourse. I'm giving my whole self to you, totally and completely. As Jesus took on our flesh, we take on each other's. As Jesus became one with us, we become one with each other. And the church would say a couple can have a beautiful exchange of vows in the church and a beautiful videographer and a wonderful reception. And if they haven't had sex, if they haven't had intercourse, there's no marriage. We call that consummated. That's not new theology. Consummated. Why? Because it's such a beautiful act. The beautiful act is it's the expression of our lifestyles, the expression of God giving himself to us that we're reflecting. And if this has been part of my life on a regular basis, then what difference does it mean that after I get married? Because it's just another night, another day. What comes out in that article is there are lots of things in our society we have to wait for. I use examples in there. You know, the couple, I'll say to them, you know, they might be 25, 30 years old, whatever they might be, and gone together for 4 years. If you got in an accident tonight, you know, could you give permission for the other person to a doctor to operate? No, I'm not. Only the parents can do that. Oh, can you go on the other person's insurance? And most times, no, I can't go on their person. Not until we get married. You know, John Smith is elected president of the United States in November. Can he act as president in December? No, he has to be inaugurated. Policemen, firemen have to be sworn in. You're going to get married in May. I'm going to get ordained a priest or a deacon in August or July or in October. Would you let me witness your marriage? No, you're not a priest. Well, we don't let politicians act in their role until they're sworn in. You can't make a decision for somebody surgically until you're sworn in, the whole bit. And that's true in our society in lots of ways. But somehow we lost it within marriage. And what couples will say, I never thought of it that way. Wow, I never heard it that way. it's eye-opening. And what they do with that then is up to them. I don't come back and tell them they have to tell me if they're abstaining or not. And, I presented the ideal, and up to them to make the most of that.
Mhm. Mhm. Like you said, again, it's a form of evangelization. Share the story, share the idea, and then, you just pray for them and because there's so much damage done. We have this hookup culture that's hurting people. And I think a lot of times young people go into it thinking it's going to be fun and exciting. And it is until it isn't,
Precisely.
And when it isn't, it can be such a painful wake-up call, of an unwanted pregnancy or, the pain of a breakup or, when you've made those kind of close ties with another person. People don't realize what kind of pain that they open themselves up to with sexuality outside of marriage.
Right, because we've been so intimate, and now that's not our lifestyle.
Right.
We've been living a lifestyle that's not what we've vowed to. It's a song. We've been living something that we haven't committed ourselves to, and so now there's that inconsistency, and that's when your vocabulary wake up to see there's a conflict here.
It's beautiful in John Paul II's theology of the body. He talks about the body's right to intimacy.
Sure.
This deep privacy of the heart and soul, and marriage is the best protection for that. The only protection for it.
And again, we live in a society, and I get sucked into this. Everything is instantaneous and comfortable and convenient. Why wait for anything? For anything. Have instant coffee, instant this, instant that. Have the remote to turn the television on. I don't have to get up and turn it on myself. So, have the phone with me 24/7. All that we live in. I get sucked into all that, and so it's working with engaged couples is a great opportunity to talk about all that. Really is.
Your book is wonderful. You've really put together 9 beautiful chapters here of great ideas and tidbits of knowledge and wisdom, and we've touched on quite a bit of it. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention? I know we're running out of time, but is there anything else that's really important to you to mention?
No, I think we've hit most of the high points of the articles. The articles obviously were not all written at once. It's not like someone sits down and writes a book. Most people write a book. The first article was written over 40 years ago. The last one was just published for the first time this past January, last month. So it's things that they came up, in my own reflections, my own ministry, my own spirituality of working with people. So it's for me, it's nice to see it all together, and that's what started all this. Is that all these different articles 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 17 years ago, really, someone 1 month, but to have them all, for me, to have them all together is a great value. And I think what I would hope what's going to come out of this is a lot of people would say, I didn't even know that those articles ever existed.
Right.
Literally. But now that they're all together into one book, hopefully more people will have an opportunity, and hopefully it can be used in different ways, and perhaps seminaries, perhaps diaconate programs. Who knows how it can be used.
For families, if you're homeschooling. It's also, I want to say it's it was about 140 pages. The articles aren't super long. Again, it's called Smelling Like the Sheep as We Minister to God's People.
Right.
Great ideas, Father Bill Waters. Where can people get the book, Father?
They can. There's something about the title. The title is directly related to a comment of Pope Francis, who talked about the priest, and the priest should be so involved with the people that they smell like the sheep. That's that's where the title comes. Someone said to me, what's that title all about? What's that mean? But it comes from really the Pope. So it's very Pope Francis oriented. They can get the book, and I'm very grateful to En route Publishers. I came across them, not directly. Somebody referred me to them, but I never knew them. And I have to say they couldn't have been any nicer to me in this last 2 months of putting all this.
Yeah, Sebastian Mahfoud, he's a good guy.
Sebastian has put a lot of time and effort, and he never knew me from the man in the moon, and to put all this together. And I'm so very, very
Sebastian and I met at Holy Apostles College and Seminary, I guess about 10 years ago now. So we've been buddies for a while.
I'm very grateful to him for what he's done with this. And so what his publisher is called is En route Book and Media. So enroutebookandmedia.com. And I believe this just went online today, Valentine's Day.
Congratulations.
Just went online today. And I believe that the paperback copies will be available late next week, but they can go online today, enroutebookandmedia.com. And I also think Amazon.
Yep, it'll be available en route books and media and Amazon.
Right.
Wonderful. Well, I thank you for your time. This has been delightful.
Kiki.
Do you want to end us with a prayer, Father?
Sure. Again, Lord, thank you for all your blessings, especially the gift of your son, Jesus. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about Jesus and the church. Thank you for the opportunity to use the media to be proclaimers and to be evangelizers. And may those who may be here and get involved in these discussions come closer to you. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity. Thank you for Kiki. Thank you for Sebastian for being able to put all this together. And we say all of this to Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you so much. This has been a great delight. And if you put
Great.
something else together, let me know.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kiki. I appreciate it. It was great. It was a great conversation. It really was.
Absolutely. God bless. Thank you.